Hello everyone, so let's start building our app. If you open your Xcode and go to create new project, as we have explained before, most of our work will be on the iOS single view application. Even for apps that will have more than one view, we'll start with single view application and then add second views as we did in project number 2. This app will start naming it for our purpose. Start with your last name followed by the app name, and leave everything the same. Its device is the iPhone, and make sure you choose storyboard and automatic reference counting. Then click next, and we'll save this project in the folder where you save everything, and then say create. Xcode creates the project file for you. Open up to the configuration. You can adjust this as you want, and this is where you upload the app icons. These are the images that you have seen in the overview when we were browsing the store for different apps. Open to the storyboard, and as we said, in this app we have a model and view and controller. In the view, we put the user interface, and that's where the storyboard is. The controller, that's where the view controller classes comes in. Every view has its own controller, and then you have the model, which can be as simple as some data in memory or data in file that you load directly to the controller, or data in file that you load into its own data controller class, and we will work on multiple of those in the next 2 projects. So for now, our view will be the storyboard, and we have only one view. The controller will be the view controller class, which is connected to the view, and our model will be a file that is saved in our project file, and we will load that into the controller. So the controller will act both as data controller as well as view controller for this particular app. The user interface, play with it the way you want. The only requirement for this project is to have 2 picker views, or to have a picker view. If you want to make a picker view with 2 columns and play with that, that's fine with me. I am going to use 2 picker views, a text field for the user to enter the amount, a button for the user to make the conversion, and a label to display the result to the user at the end. And in this video, I'm going to introduce the model, and as we said, we will build the picker view interface, and we will build the property list file and load the data into the picker view and display this data. So let's start working. So some people will say, okay, so I now know the different components I want to create. I'm going to create user interface, I'm going to create controller, and I'm going to create a model. Which one should I start with? It's up to you. Decide what you want and build your own comfort zone. I personally like to build it from the bottom up. Bottom here I refer to the least independent component, and then move up to the chain to the controller, and then to the view. Or you can start from the view, or build it from the view and the model, and the controller comes in between. Whatever you like. For this particular purpose, I'm going to build the file first, put the data in it. Then I'm going to build the user interface, only add one piece of the user interface, which is the picker view, and then I will go to the controller, load the file, and display it in the picker view. And then after that, we'll add the rest of the components. The reason I sliced this project like this, and we call this iteration, when you take the big problem and break it down into smaller problem, is that the picker view is really the only new element that we have in this project, and the file. So I'm starting with them to make sure that I understand them, I know how to use them, and so on. And the other pieces, I have already done them before, so it is easy for us to do the different control and the view for them. So let's start. I'm going to adjust it to the 3.5-inch screen here. You don't have to do that, whatever you prefer. And to add the view, the file, you go to Xcode, go to File, and New, and in the new choose File. or you can come from the project, right click, and then say I want a new file. So new file, and then there are different types of template files. If you go to resource, there are different types of files that you can hold as resources. The property list file is the one that we're going to use for this project. So next, and then it will ask you to give it a name, and I will call this units list. This is the file that has the units list. Always use expressive names that describe what this project has. Now you have to remember whatever name you put in here, because when we go in the controller to load that file, we have to know exactly the name. Notice there's an extension to the file called plist, and the file name it is units list, and these are case sensitive. The file comes with something made out of 3 columns. The first column has what's called key, the second one is the type, and the third one is the value. The value is where you put the value you want for this project. The type is what is the type of this value. When you load the project into memory, the type determines the size of memory that you want, and also it determines the behaviors, especially if that type is already defined in a library module, that determines the behavior that you can, or the type of messages you can send to that type. At the root level, which is determines what type of collection you want to create in this property list, you can either have an array or a dictionary. An array stores the value in an indexed column, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. A dictionary stores the value in a column that has keys, that has labels. So each one you give it a certain name. We will use an array here. And then you can click the plus and you start adding the array items. You see here comes item 0, which is the index 0. The type is a string, which is any list of characters, number, date, data, boolean, or you can have an array as an item. In our case, it will be a string, which is the name of the unit. So here I'm going to say this is feet, and then hit enter or the plus to add another one. You can hit minus to delete that, or hit on it to modify it if you type something wrong. Feet, mile, and then meter, kilometer, and inch. Right, this is the group that I will use. Feel free to add more, or you feel free, I'm using the length category here, you feel free to use a different category, whatever you want. For simplicity, in this project we'll only assume there's only one category. So now that we built our file and saved it, that's all what we need to create a property list file. Now this will be saved on the hard drive of your device. Now let's go and build the user interface, and then go to the controller and load the file into the user interface. We'll go to our utility area and look for the picker view. So why the picker view? Now with experience, you will learn more and more about the different library user interface control that we have, and you will have a sense of what is the best user interface that you want. Sometimes your client will tell you what they want, sometimes you know, and sometimes you will say none of these are suitable, and then you either create your own custom view or go hire somebody that will create that custom view for you. Let's take a picker view and drag it into our app the way we did with everything else. You can adjust the width, so we are going to adjust the width here to allow 2 picker views to be displayed one next to one another. I'm gonna leave it here in the middle because I penciled down the way I want to lay things out. I want them 2 next to one another. If you recall from the previous video, actually that's the page. I want to display 2 picker views, and then I have the text field, the button, and the label. So I'll leave that like this. There are some values here for the picker view, so you can choose some of those values in the attribute inspector, and so on. Now I have my user interface component. I have my file. What I need to do is I need to load the picker view with the data that comes from me. The data you see in front of you is like the full data that come with the view. Now, because I want to open the file, take the data and put it in the view, I am actually controlling the view. Every time you want to control data in the view, you need to connect it as an outlet. So I no longer need my utility inspector. Bring in my assistant editor and click and drag from the picker view to establish an outlet connection between the user interface and my controller, the view controller. Release, and this is type outlet, and we're gonna call this the unit from picker view. Unit from picker view. This is the picker view that will list all the units that the user converts from. The type is UIPickerView. Leave the storage as is, and then say connect. So I established an outlet connection between the picker view and the controller in the form of this property. Now the next step is I need to go inside and load the file, the data from the file, and display it in that property. In order to do this, I need to multiple things, and the first one is I need the array or the object in memory that will store that data for me from the file until I put it in that view. So I want to come here and define a variable that is for our array. In the previous project, we talked about defining the issue of a scope, and how the scope is the module that you define. The scope of any object is the module in which you define that object. Because this array will be used in all the modules in this controller, the data source, the events, and any modules we create ourselves, we need to give it the scope of the entire controller. To do that, we define it here in the interface. So I establish this block, and then say I want an NSArray, and then give it the star space, and then give it a name. I'm going to call it units. So this will be the reference to the data that we put in memory from the file. The second thing I want to do is I want this, in order for us to put data in the picker view, we have to be its data source. So we said we're going to use this view controller to be both the data source as well as the event delegate. Similar to what we did before with in project 1 with the text field, in order to make this controller take on additional responsibility, this controller already taken on the responsibility of being a view controller. We did that by subclassing or extending this UI view controller. This is done automatically for this particular one because the template that we selected in the creation of the project did that. But if you recall from project number 2, when we added our own view, we had to add a class that is view controller, and when we added that class, we had to select UI view controller to be its parent class. So this is the first responsibility. To add on other responsibility, we use the angle bracket, and then we list the contract, or what we call protocol, that this class is responding to. In this case, there are two: UIPickerViewDataSource, which is the protocol for any object that wants to provide the data, and you can go and read more. And then comma, we need to also add the UIPickerViewDelegate for anyone if you want to respond to events from there. These two means that our controller is now taking on 3 responsibilities: being the controller of the view, being the data source of the picker view, being capable of being a data source for any picker view, and being capable of being a picker view delegate for any picker view. We have not yet said that this particular view controller is the data source or the delegate for this particular view. We will do that next. So now let's click on the implementation file, and I'm going to slide out my navigation to make some more room. So we have our interface, and we do a few things first. Any property we have, synthesize that property, and we will call this unit from PickerView. The second thing is we need to assign this particular class to be the data source and the PickerView for this particular PickerView. So we do that over here. So we say number one, assign or declare that this object, which we refer to by the word self, is a data source for the units from PickerView. We do this by sending a message to the PickerView. So PickerView, and then we say set data source, and we say self. Set data source accepts any type that implemented the UIPickerView data source. The same thing, we want to declare that this object, which is referred to with the keyword self, is a delegate for the units from PickerView. We do this by sending a message to the PickerView by saying set the delegate and say self is your delegate. It accepts this only because self, which is the object of this view controller, has implemented these two protocols. All right? The second thing that we want to do is we want to load the data from the file and assign it as the data. We load the data from the file to the units array and then assign that unit array to be the data source for the PickerView. So the step number 3 will be load the data from the file into the units array. To load the data, we go through 3 steps. Step number 1, get a reference to the root folder of the app. We call it the bundle. By using the library NSBundle. Now you say, how did you know that the library called NSBundle? Well, I know, and I'm telling you, as you build your experience, read more of the guides, learn, work on different things, you will build your own vocabulary of the libraries that you use in different cases. So we send a message to the NSBundle and say, give me a reference to the app main bundle. Then the next step is we need to get a reference to the path of the file that we want to load. This path is a string. Or before I go to that, I get that by sending a message to the bundle. So I go to the bundle and say, give me the path for a resource. And as you can see, the path for resource message receives 2 parameters. The first parameter is the name of the resource. The second parameter is the file extension of the resource. And the path returns the full path name of the resource. What is the type of that return? Here is the type, NSString star. So when we hit enter, the first value here should be the name of the file, whatever name we give to the file. And you probably forgot, so I bring that back my navigation, and the name of the file is the unit list, the unit list, and it's uppercase U, the way I put it. If you named it something different, you put whatever name you put in there. And then you hit tab to switch to the second parameter, and at any string starts with an at followed by double quotations. Then the extension is plist or lowercase. The path for resource will go find the file name that has this name and this list and return this file name as a string. So I have to assign the return to something of the same type as the return from the message. And as you can see, this was NSString star. And I can call this file name path. I'll make room by taking away my navigation. Then the third step is to load the data from that file into my units array. Load the data from the file into the units array. So I say I send the message to the unit array, and this message comes from the NSArray, and say to it, give me an array from the contents of a file. So give me an array from the contents of a file, and this message receives one parameter which is of type NSString* that has the path of the file specified by a given path. That's why I had to get a path first, and returns an array. ID is a generic type for anything, so it returns an array, so I need to assign whatever it returns into that units array reference that I created. So I give this the file name path, and I need to assign the result to the units. Notice I only use the name. The reason I used the name and I did not provide the type is because I provided the type in the interface in the header file. By providing the type in the header file, I give this variable the path, or this reference, the path of the entire view controller, so I can use it in any module, not particularly that module. However, the bundle module, since I declared it on line 26 in the ViewDidLoad module, this bundle is only visible inside the ViewDidLoad, and same is for the file name path. But units is not. Units I can access in anywhere. The last part, now that I load the content of the file into memory, now I need to put that content inside the view controller. To do that, let's learn a little inside the PickerView. To do that, let's learn a little bit about the PickerView. Best way is to open the organizer. So click on the organizer to the right, or go to Window and select Organizer, or click Shift Command 2, and go to Documentation on the organizer, and go to Search, and search for UIPickerViewDataSource. And let's see what this UIPickerViewDataSource has for us. This is a protocol. This is the way to learn about anything that exists in the library. You notice there are two tasks. The first task starts with the name number, and this task gives back how many components in the PickerView. In our example, the way I'm going with this is only one component. The component are the columns. How many columns your PickerView should have. In my case, I only have one, because I have two PickerViews, one for the from and one for the to. The second is how many rows are there in that PickerView. So these two tasks are very important that we need to implement. The second tasks, and let's look at what the PickerViewDelegate has for us. And the PickerView has several tasks. The row height, the width for component, and the title for row. The title for row, or view for row, which means that you can provide a whole view, not just a title. You can create your own custom view with an image and whatever you want. Here we're just going to use a title for row. And there is didSelectRow, which is responding to a row selection. This is the one we're going to use, the title for row, in order to provide, to use the name of the unit as the title for each row in the PickerView. So you see, in order to put data in the PickerView, I have to implement the three tasks that are defined by the protocols. So let's start implementing those tasks. The first task, type dash and start writing the name, so the number of components in PickerView. You see Xcode already recognizes and display to you a potential task because you declared yourself as taking on the responsibility of the data source, so it picks that. So you just hit enter. Never really type, because there's case sensitivity issue. Do not type, just hit enter, and Xcode will type it for you. What we did here is we implemented the name of the task, of the method. Now I have to define the body of the method by having the open curly brace, hit enter, and Xcode will give you the close curly brace. Notice that this one returns an integer and it requires one number of components. The keyword return allow you to send back the value that this particular module or method, we call it method, wants, and it requires an expression. That expression can be a constant, can be a message, can be a calculation, whatever you want. In our case, by hitting tab, I spin to this, I'm returning 1. I'm saying there's only one component in that picker view. One column in the picker view. I'm typing a comment here. Then let's add another task. To add another task, I have to go completely outside the module. You cannot have, it has to be between the implementation and end, but outside any other module. So type this and then type picker. And then here is the second task, which is picker view number of rows in component. How many rows in the component? If you have more than one component, this method will be called with the component index, and then use the curly brace to define the button. This one also wants an integer. How many rows? I have as many rows as I have elements in my units array. So I need to return. And what am I returning now? I'm using a message. I'm going to send the message to the units array, and I will ask the unit array to give me how many objects or how many rows it has, because whatever the units array has is whatever was in the file and whatever I want to display on the user interface. Finally, the last one is the one that says title for row. This one give you one of the parameters is an integer representing the index of the row that it wants the title for. So you said, like, I have 5 rows. So what the picker view does is it attempts to display the row at index 0. So it notifies this message and send a call to this message to the object, to this object that is a delegate, and say, you are my delegate. I want you to give me the title that should appear at row 0. So row here, the row as a parameter will have the number of the row that needs to be displayed. So what should I return? It needs to return a string. So what should I return here? I return the actual object that's in my array. So I will send the message to my units array and say, give me the object that exists at that index. The index of the row in the column, the index of the row in the picker view is the same as the index of the row in the array, is the same as the index of the row in the file. So I say, here is the index, give me the object from the array. And that returns that to the picker view. So I implemented these 3 tasks that are defined in the protocols, and now I'm ready to test my picker view. What I am testing here is a sub piece of my entire project, which is, am I able to get my picker view to read the data correctly from the file or not? And we'll wait a few seconds on that. The app will load, and here is the picker view, and the picker view, and you can scroll through, and as you scroll through, you see it has all the items in the same order that we had in the file. Let me bring the file so you can see that in case you forgot. Here is the start with feet, but then mile, meter, kilometer, and inches. Alright, so this completes this video, and in the next video we continue building. Now that we know how to get that first piece done, we can build the rest of the app.